Everyone. This event is organized by the Israeli Forum for Intelligence Studies, and we have with us not only the usual members, Hebrew-speaking members of IFIS, but also international intelligence studies scholars whom we invite to our English-speaking events. For those of you who do not know us or joining us the first time, I will briefly introduce myself, provide a short overview of the Israeli Forum for Intelligence Studies, IFIS, so you have a broader sense of what we do. IFIS, where I, Amir Kahana, serve as a coordinator, was established more than 3 years ago as an initiative of the Institute for the Research of the Methodology of Intelligence in order to promote academic research and education on intelligence in Israel. We're basically a network of Israeli scholars engaging with issues pertaining to intelligence from broader disciplinary perspectives. It could be political science, could be history, could be law. IFIS is also sponsored by the Lena Davis Institute for International Relations in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where we hold an annual international conference on intelligence studies, and also these monthly, mostly online meetings. So I want to invite you to visit our website, to follow us on social media or YouTube, where most of our recorded past events are available. I also invite you to look out for a call for paper for the next annual conference, which will be circulated later this year. We keep those of you who are on our English-speaking mailing list abreast of any future English-speaking events, either offline or online. And today's speaker is Dr. Clément Renault, a senior research fellow in intelligence, war, and strategy in the French Institute for Strategic Research and an adjunct professor at the Sciences Po, Paris School of International Affairs. He earned his PhD in war studies in the University of Glasgow and was a visiting fellow in the Department of War Studies at King's College London. He recently published an article in the International Journal of Intelligence and CounterIntelligence titled AI Intelligence Processing, Analysis, and Decision-Making in the Russia-Ukraine War, where he examines how the Russia-Ukrainian war serves as a critical empirical case for understanding how artificial intelligence reshapes intelligence processing, analysis, and decision-making, on which he will elaborate during the next 40 minutes. Then the floor will be left for us for discussion. So take the stage, Renault.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Amir, for this introduction and for inviting me to give this talk. I'm quite glad to participate to your group since I was not able to be there for the last forum that you guys organized. Maybe next year or maybe in 2026 I'll be able to join you. But thanks for the opportunity. And yeah, I'm going to talk about mostly the paper I published in the International Journal of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. And this paper is part of a broader sort of research program that I'm assessing to myself about trying to understand what is going on in terms of intelligence in the Russo-Ukrainian war. I think that there's a lot of transformational elements going on out there, and of course, it's being followed in many different ways of research, especially the defense aspects and the military aspects, the frontline aspect, the negotiations aspects. However, the intelligence aspect is not so much covered, although, of course, it's part of the broader conflict. So I'm interested in trying to understand what is exactly changing out there and to what extent what is going on in the conflict is actually some sort of representative of how intelligence organizations are adapting, evolving, and what are sort of the new challenges facing intelligence organizations. So that's what I'm sort of focusing on at the moment. So I will briefly talk about aspects of debating AI in intelligence and how this paper actually came to be what it is and why it was published. I I do think that debating AI in intelligence is not is part of a broader discussions about sort of the information age and how the information age is impacting intelligence organizations and intelligence practices. And within this broader debate, there's been, of course, several arguments related to several aspects or sub-aspects of the information age. The first one is, of course, debates about open source intelligence that have been taking place over the last few years. And and of course, the Russo-Ukrainian War has been one of the main case study about how OSINT was used in this conflict. And I think that there's been other sort of ways to discuss the impact of information age related to cyber intelligence and big data. And I think all of these debates have made several arguments in their sort of sub debates and sub fields of study. But I think debating AI sort of comes to trying to understand how those new technologies impact the work of intelligence. So that's why I was interested in sort of contributing to this debate. Now, there's been, of course, different and several arguments being put about those different aspects of the transformation of intelligence, and that scholars have sort of argued that information age he's displacing, especially when it comes to the debates about open source intelligence, that is displacing the traditional centrality of secrecy, and that open source intelligence is basically transforming not only the capabilities, but also the very ways that intelligence organizations need to interact with the open source and the data that they collect. So I think all of these debates have been going around, and AI is definitely one of the contribution to these broader debates. Among the key sort of arguments that have been made has been this argument about the intelligence revolution and about AI being the revolution that changes the practice and that changes everything because of the convergence of technological innovation and with deep operational and institutional transformation, so that AI would basically be sort of the capability that changes the very core of the intelligence work and of the intelligence tradecraft. So I was interested in sort of challenging or trying to assess how how much this idea or these arguments were actually taking place or could be proved or proven in the Russo-Ukrainian War. Um, the other arguments that have been made about AI in the pieces that have been published so far in the literature is also contrary to the sort of revolution in intelligence affairs, underlying the persistent limitations of AI when they come to be applied to complex, uncertain, and adversarial environments. Um, Many scholars have argued that while AI can indeed accelerate data processing and highlight patterns, it also sort of lacks the interpretive reasoning, and that the main argument, of course, of this issue is that of this position is that AI may contribute or does contribute to the intelligence work, but for many reasons, and we'll see that later in the discussions or in the talk, human analysts and decision makers still need to play a key role in this process. So to participate or to contribute to these debates about AI, I was interested in using sort of a case study methodology, using the case of the Russo-Ukrainian War to sort of examine the conceptual validity and the hypotheses that have been exposed so far in the literature. And of course, the Russo-Ukrainian War is a timely and revealing case study because both sides are using AI massively. They're investing massively in those capabilities, and they're implementing it in their ways of not only conducting the war, but in their ways to process and analyze intelligence. And they've been doing so intensively since February 2022. So we also have sort of a time and an evolution that we can document and witness to see how much it has evolved over the last years and how much it has impacted the intelligence work on both sides. So sort of the key question or the research question of that paper was driven to what does the Russo-Ukrainian War reveal about the impacts of AI on the core intelligence functions of processing, analysis, and support to decision making. I was specifically interested in focusing on those aspects of processing, analysis, and support to decision making, because this is the area where most of the arguments that are being discussed are lie in terms of whether it changes processing, whether it changes analysis, whether it can actually replace analysts, and whether or not it actually changes the very ways the decisions are being taken, not only on the front line, but more broadly in terms of the inputs that come out of those tools. So I was interested in specifically focusing and trying to sort of test those hypotheses with this specific case. One quick word about the sources. I've basically based that piece on official statements, documents from Ukraine's and Western allies and from Russia. Many primary sources available on official websites, speeches, of course, and even speeches in Russian that can actually document how it's being used, and a lot of declassified military and intelligence reports, as well as policy papers by think tanks and specialists on defense issues, which I am not a specialist of defense issues. So I basically use those reports to try to find out and answer my research question. So about the use of AI in the Russo-Ukrainian war, I think that the first important aspect to sort of take into consideration is how each side has leveraged AI. And interestingly, although not surprisingly, they have both used and leveraged AI in very different ways. What is very striking about the Ukrainian case is how much they have been able to integrate civil and military capabilities. There's been since 2014 a lot of grassroots state communities and volunteer networks that have played a really crucial role in building open source and AI-enabled tools. And this not only developed after 2014, but it also developed, and I will come back about intelligence cooperation and the help of allies. It also developed this grassroots and these civil capabilities did develop alongside cyber capabilities and cyber and support from private companies coming from the United States, from the United Kingdom. So creating an ecosystem of private companies developing tools and open source intelligence capabilities that have that have developed quite strikingly, so that by February 2022, when all of these civilian innovators and private sector companies and startups and all these small companies basically turned their capabilities, and the Ukrainian government turned these capabilities into making platforms that would help the defense effort. What the environment that was created in Ukraine was a thriving environment for innovation, for integrating new tools, not only coming from Ukrainians themselves, but also coming, as I was mentioning, from American cyber companies and people traveling around with sharing capabilities, sharing know-how. So that interestingly, this private sector ecosystem has developed since 2014, but since 2022 has very much played a role into integrating data and into integrating artificial intelligence into the defense and military apparatus. So that a report that was published last year evaluated the number of AI-focused companies in Ukraine to be around 243, with IT and software workforce of turning around 307,000 specialists. Now, this is broadly speaking, but what it shows is that this is only Ukrainian companies. This is not even talking about all those foreign companies that are also contributing to help the Ukrainians. And all of these is private sector companies. And this basically shows how dense and how strongly this private sector has developed very quickly over the last few years. Now, clearly, these private sector capabilities have been leveraged by the Ukrainian government, and that's been one of the main characteristics of this integration and this use of AI for military defense and intelligence capacities in the Ukrainian case, is the effort and the institutionalization of these efforts by the Ukrainian governments, creating initiatives such as Brave One in 2023 through the Digital Ministry of Innovation. And these initiatives basically are platforms that put together private companies, small companies, innovators, potential financial support together with governments and defense organizations to put together those capabilities. And it has really been very effective since 2023. Now, the Ukrainian government has also put in place structural transformation to better integrate these AI tools into defense capabilities. I was mentioning the Ministry of Digital Transformation, but also the unmanned system forces and the special unit Typhoon. All of these units inside the Ministry of Defense or inside military and defense capabilities really work closely with private sector companies to leverage those tools that are being developed in the private sector and in those small units. Now, for the military intelligence and for the security service, they've also expanded their role and broadened their reach and capabilities. Their fundings has expanded drastically since 2022. And of course, they've also leveraged their own capabilities and used AI massively, especially in their operations towards Russia, in Russia as well. I come back on spiderweb operation later. So intelligence services have also very much used those capabilities in their own work. So that the ecosystem that has developed in Ukraine is very much there are many tools, there are many companies, and there's many small tools, but I think that the three main ones are the Delta, OCHI, and Griselda platforms of software. I was mentioning Delta created in 2023. Is it a platform for meeting and for people to share capabilities? But the whole point is about aggregating real data from drones, satellites, commercial sensors, and allied intelligence feeds. And this is also where a cooperation with allies and especially CIA and NSA has been very strong, with a lot of inputs from NSA specifically to help develop those tools and making them very efficient in multi-fusion, in infusing multi-source intelligence. OCHI is also an interesting initiative. It's more discreet, but it's still very much used on the front line, especially when it comes to aggregating drone footage to improve target recognition. Millions of hours of footage have been collected and being compared and being analyzed by those AI tools that very much help to sort of identify and target Russian concentration and Russian troops. So OCHI started as a small company, very small company, and it has integrated very much into the defense and military capabilities. Griselda also started as a small company with the goal of processing mostly unstructured data to automate the extraction of intelligence from battlefield reports and intercepted communication. And they've had several contracts with the Ministry and Defense apparatus, and now they are being considered or sometimes called the Ukrainian Palantir. And it is true that they are expanding their reach widely into Ukrainian forces in terms of unstructured data and making sense of a lot of inputs coming from various sources. I was mentioning it before, but in this ecosystem of innovation and in the ecosystem of interaction between the private sector and the defense sector in Ukraine, ally support has been, of course, key, and especially US support in providing imagery intelligence, SIGINT, and cyber intelligence. There's been several very interesting papers about being published about how the Americans and the British were so confident about their assessment of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But one interesting aspect is that part of the intelligence capabilities that they had was also related to the SIGINT access and the cyber intelligence access that they had, not only through their own capabilities as NSA or CIA, but also through this private sector and ecosystem of cyber companies related to NSA and operating in Ukraine, so that especially when it came to documenting Russian strategy in the cyberspace, they were able to put that strategy in relations to what they were able to collect in SIGINT and IMINT, so that they could actually document the fact that the Russians were pre-positioning APT deep into Ukrainian systems and patterns of action that very much resemble those that they had put in place before invading Crimea. So what I mean by that is that this cooperation has been very important for the United States as well with the Ukrainians, not only to help them develop their own tools, but also for allies to actually help them document Russian capabilities. And in this ecosystem, ally support in satellite imagery and SIGINT has been, of course, very important together with the private sector. Here I refer to, or I think about a paper that was published, I think earlier in March 2025 in the New York Times about the cooperation taking place at Wiesbaden between CIA, NSA, and the Ukrainians, Wiesbaden being a station in Germany, where a lot of SIGINT capabilities are being put together, and liaison officers from the Ukrainian military, from military intelligence and security intelligence are also being put, so that a lot of intelligence is being processed out there with, of course, a lot of those AI tools that were developed together between the United States and the Ukrainians. So allied support in developing this ecosystem has been absolutely fundamental. On the Russian side, however, it's been a little different, and it has evolved over time, and especially since 2022. On the Russian side, what is interesting is that we tend to maybe think that the private sector is not so diverse as the Ukrainian, but what has been pushed forward by the Russian government over the last few years is the development of dual-use AI technologies that could be used both in the civil but may have defense applications. So the conglomerates such as Roadstack and the Constant Group, for instance, have been very important in developing those sort of dual-use AI technologies. However, and I will come back to this afterwards, it's only since 2024 really that the Russians have started to sort of scale up their information capabilities. And clearly by 2022, 2023, they were not at scale compared to what the Ukrainians were able to do together with NATO and the Western support. So it's been sort of a growing capacity. And now clearly they're more and more using those tools. So that in mid-2025, Russia established a Central Artificial Intelligence Development Center, which is, again, sort of dual-use AI technologies. It's not only for development of defense and military and intelligence capabilities, but it's also made to use civilian AI initiatives and try to sort of create a prosperous and dynamic ecosystem of innovation in AI. But of course, you do not sort of declare capabilities, or you also have to. It's not just about wanting it. And so the Central Artificial Intelligence Development Center may create new incentives, but it will not resolve all of the problems that the Russians have faced. What interestingly, although on the Russian side, is the use of tools and capabilities that they've basically taken on shelves or that they've copied. I think about the integration of NVIDIA's Jetson Orin, which is an American capability, but that is widely used in the civilian world. So they've basically copied it and they've tried to implement it and use those tools to sort of put it into intelligence and military capabilities. And of course, the role of the Chinese as well in supplying those kind of new AI tools, especially in terms of autonomous maneuvering and to improve strike precision. So in the Russian case, civil-military relations in the Russian case, not only the civil-military relations have been not so dynamic as in the Ukrainian case. However, what they've used mostly and what they're really strong, what they've proved to be really strong in using AI is in SIGINT and in signals intelligence. And they've used it massively to process large volumes of intercepted Ukrainian communications. And I think specifically about the Torn MDM system that has been implemented and shared widely throughout the Ukrainian military. Now, the question, of course, is how effective those tools are on the Russian side, and they're getting more and more efficient. especially when it comes also to drone imagery and the implementation and the use of drone footage into creating into creating systems that can be AI supported and semi-autonomous. So drone imagery and SIGINT are probably the two main areas in that the Russians have gone to scale over the last 2 years. And especially in the last 2 years, I was mentioning, AI integration has gradually become really more structured, with state institutions now more systematically aligned and a sort of a willingness to align scientific research, industrial capacity, and battlefield application. Now, of course, the economy of war is contributing to it, and 40% of the GDP is being sent into the economy of war. It does help, of course, but it does not. Sort of circumvent all of the problems. And part of those problems, and although it's not something that it's not a theoretical framework that I'm using in my paper, but a part of this framework is of course conditioned by underlying aspects of strategic culture between Ukraine and between Russia. And what is clear in their ecosystem is that the Russian forces have integrated AI-enabled systems into several aspects of their intelligence work, but they have often applied them in constrained and uneven ways, and they've faced difficulties in implementing them because really of their highly centralized state control and rigid, sort of more rigid defense and military apparatus. So to get maybe to the core of the issue now, what do those tools do really to intelligence? And again, I in this paper really focus on intelligence. And one of the reviewers for the paper made very good comments about and criticisms about all of these is really interesting in regards to intelligence. But what does it tell us about the character of warfare, and to what extent does AI really changes the character of warfare? It's not so much my topic here. My topic very much focuses on what it does to intelligence tradecraft, to intelligence practices. Now, the question of what these changes in intelligence or how these changes in intelligence affect the character of warfare, I do believe is a different question. Is of course a key question, a very important question, but it's not one that I'm trying to answer here, and it's not only also one that I'm competent for trying to answer. So I have been specifically focusing, and it will surprise no one here, that the primary sort of point of application of AI is in data processing and the processing and analysis phases that basically are being transformed in terms of raw data and transforming raw data into actionable knowledge. Clearly, in both cases, Ukrainian and Russian side, AI-enabled systems have truly reshaped the tempo, scale, and granularity of processing and analysis. I was mentioning earlier the New York Times article and about I think it's called the U.S. secret war in Ukraine or something like this, and it's a really interesting piece because among the interviews that the journalist was able to get, one of the generals, Ukrainian generals, testifies that at the beginning of the cooperation, after in March 2022, the fusion and the intelligence fusion that were being made at Wiesbaden between what they were getting, the raw data that they were processing with the Americans, and how it was basically used for targeting operations, took hours. At the beginning, it was a few hours between the data coming in and the decision and the actionable knowledge coming out of the tools. Within a few months, it actually turned to minutes, and now it has turned to seconds, of course. So clearly, the tempo and the scale of intelligence being turned into actionable intelligence is something that's being widely accelerated by AI, and it's something that has been widely, I think, witnessed by many analysts. The most transformative AI application in processing clearly lies in multi-source intelligence fusion, in the capability to exploit and to process together imagery, signals intelligence, open source intelligence. And the Ukrainians have shown incredible capabilities in using open source intelligence and putting it into correlating it with signals intelligence and things that they were collecting in a secret manner. So there's been several examples of this, but clearly multi-source intelligence fusion is where AI makes a big difference. In more specific sort of collection domains, AI also clearly makes a difference and increased proficiency in SIGINT by automating and structuring intelligence from intercepted communication and battlefield reports. I was mentioning Griselda earlier. It's clearly in this capacity that Griselda has proved very efficient in treating unstructured data and raw data that used to be very difficult for analysts to extract or that would require a lot of time. So those new tools are definitely helping in sort of structuring this data, making them analyzable for analysts and gaining a lot of time, especially when it comes to communication. And of course, it's especially for analysts and for translators and linguists, the capacity of AI to transcribe, translate, and categorize communication streams have basically helped linguists and analysts to focus on interpretation rather than transcription. And it's clearly something that also is a gain of time for many analysts and linguists to basically rely on those tools to help them make sense faster of the raw data and of the interpretation that they get on their desk so that AI can help them make sense of them rather than trying to or spending a lot of time translating them. So by combining crowdsourced reporting with natural language processing and facial recognition, especially Ukraine has built an impressively large and fast-moving OSINT architecture. I was mentioning earlier, there's been great articles published about this, and but most of this architecture has relied on developing AI tools. Now, the far-reaching consequence of this development has been the emergence of an unprecedented level of battlefield transparency, as many have called it, and analysts have called it, with forces on both sides being able to have near continuous tracking of troop movements, artillery deployments, and logistical convoys. And this is, of course, one of the main sort of technological consequence of these capabilities on the battlefield is this battlefield transparency. And I have colleagues who went in Ukraine a couple of months ago and told me that the visibility away from the front lines is growing days and days after days and days. And now they're basically able to see through 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers quite clearly away from the front lines. So the battlefield transparency is kind of expanding in scope and it's expanding in size. So it's clearly something that has also contributed to make the front lines what it is right now. Of course, one of the side impact of these tools, technologization of war and technologization of intelligence, is the psychological impact of battlefield transparency, which makes for combatants the perception of being constantly observed, that erodes morale and contributes to a sense of insecurity. So that's sort of the consequence of this intelligence processing or this intelligence being processed so quickly, is that it not only changes the battlefield, but it also creates some other sort of psychological and warfare and cognitive other cognitive elements. So about data, about AI and data processing, I think the key aspect is that AI role in processing and analysis extends far beyond technical efficiency. And this is what we tend to focus usually, is about how technically efficient it is and how it changes the technicality of intelligence processing. But it actually creates, by accelerating those flows, it actually creates auto consequences. By accelerating workflows, it not only improves precision, but it's clearly a force multiplier with important operational consequences. And this is probably where I think the aspects of AI intelligence do change a number of things, especially when it comes to processing data faster and making sense of them faster so that actionable knowledge can be used faster. Of course, the ability to make decision making faster and make a difference and make a comparable difference with the adversary is of course where the key difference lie. So what AI has really changed in terms of intelligence processing is at the tactical level. Clearly, the acceleration of decision-making cycles has enabled units to interpret and act on incoming intelligence with unprecedented speed and develop a level of autonomy that is also part of the change of warfare. And Delta and OCHI especially have enabled commanders to act within seconds. I was mentioning the article earlier in the New York Times, but within seconds of receiving geolocated target information. And although, and especially it's interesting in the Ukrainian case, they do give the call in the end, and they do not automate the targeting. They have, however, considerably reduced the time decision making. What this changes in terms of organization at the tactical level is that it has enabled a partial decentralization of decision-making authority, and it's clearly one of the aspects that is key to sort of making the best of those tools. It's one thing to have the raw data and to have the intelligence being processed quickly and to turn them into actionable intelligence quickly. But if you still have a structured and highly hierarchical organization in which you still need to have the green light from the higher echelons to target or to make a clear decision, you are basically losing the leverage that the time is giving you with these tools. So what it has created, especially on the Ukrainian side, is a real decentralization of decision-making authority. And it has created ways for the Ukrainian military to reorganize around the idea of giving greater authority to the tactical level for making quick decisions. At the operational level, having quick intelligence being facilitated by AI tools has had an influence on coordination and resource allocation. And real-time situational awareness has clearly helped reorganize and operational commands and prioritize resources. It's again sort of the consequences of having faster information actionable in a quick way is that you are able to have faster information to make choices at the operational level to reorganize more quickly. It's sort of the side effect that I think is really important that really changes how it operates. And I was mentioning earlier the Russian IMINT and SIGINT capabilities, but in the Russian side, on the Russian side, what has been interesting as well is especially in their implementation of those tools and the new tools that they've developed, is that they have themselves been able to sort of implement these tools and scale up what was initially a greater greater Ukrainian capabilities to sort of I'm finding my words in English here, but to sort of coming up of transforming basically of transforming their way of adapting and transforming their capability to scale up with the Ukrainians. So field units are increasingly capable of processing and acting on AI derived data autonomously and to adapt, I was mentioning, to a more decentralized and dynamic command structure. At the strategic level, that was I was trying to say earlier, at the strategic level, Ukraine's ability to integrate AI-enabled capabilities has helped them leverage sort of the information capabilities is turned into a critical determinant of its capacity to resist Russian aggression, especially in the first few months of the aggression. The ecosystem that I was exposing earlier really did help the Ukrainians to sort of have the advantage on the battlefield and to shape, and these elements of technological advantage has helped shape the tragic trajectory of the conflict, and by enabling a level of situational awareness. Now, what has changed over the last year, I think, on the battlefield is that I was mentioning earlier, the Russians are increasingly using these tools as well, and and it has kind of leveled up, so that the strategic advantage in terms of information capabilities that the Ukrainians used to have has sort of being equalized. I will probably get a little faster because the time is running. I think one of the elements that I wanted to sort of develop in this paper as well was that while the argument is being made widely that AI is really sort of an intelligence and a revolution in intelligence affairs, and that it changes processing, changes analysis, and it's clear that it does. And I think that the case of the Russo-Ukrainian war is revealing in this case is also that, interestingly, new technologies, when they appear, tend to, create inflation of discourses in terms of what they're capable of doing, what they're capable of transforming. And it's only when they're being basically tested against the bureaucracy, tested against implementation, tested against, innovation by organizations, that they tend to reveal not only their own and their real capabilities, but also their flaws. And by being implemented really on both sides now, what is interesting is that what was at the beginning strong leverages and capabilities that in processing and analysis are creating new passes and new ways for actually sort of circumventing these tools and circumventing the operational advantage of these tools. And it especially appears when it comes to deception. And both sides have started in the last few months and in the last year to really try to develop capabilities and engineer inputs in the forms of alternate imagery, in fake SIGINT reports, and falsified data to basically manipulate algorithmic analysis. And deception has in the last year, interestingly, increasingly targeted not only human brains or human cognitive capabilities and human analysis as it's been historically made, but to increasingly target computational processes and machine learning systems. And this is, I think, one of the interesting aspects of one of the side effects that AI is producing when it's being widely used on both sides, is that both sides tend to now develop tools also by AI to basically create deception strategies against the adversary, so that their own AI tools is being decepted. And I think that's an evolution this is also sort of undermining parts of the capabilities and parts of the systems of AI. So AI systems rely really on patterns learned from historical training data, and that makes them very vulnerable to adversarial manipulation and inputs crafted to produce incorrect but confident outputs. And I do think that this is a trend that is appearing in the Russo-Ukrainian war, something that we may not have thought about before, but that is clearly expanding. And we'll see in the next. I'll come back maybe about to come back to the nominations that Zelensky has made, because I think that the sort of the shuffling that he has made around his cabinet and his key advisors and head of SBU and military intelligence is also sort of revealing of this trend that is appearing in the conflict. And so I think that one argument that I'm making in this paper is that the very attributes that make AI transformative for intelligence processing and analysis also interestingly create parallel expansion in the scope and the tempo of deception operations, so that both sides are again leveraging AI capabilities to try to decept and to try to make AI tools decepting or affecting judgments on the other side. One quick word about something that is quite obvious and that we all know of, but I do think that the AI is, of course, creating new ways of interpreting and processing data, but it does not change the key challenge that analysts have always faced about the burden of abundance. I think that the advance of AI really introduces new efficiencies, and I've tried to show that before, but it does not resolve the enduring problem of information overload, especially for analysts, and especially because AI system um, rely entirely on inference from data. And inference is only one way of reasoning. And in an era or in a moment where most of the tools are being, or a lot of the tools are being used, and AI tools to decept the adversary, I think that the old challenges of intelligence analysis are also not only not being changed, but they're being renewed, and they're being renewed by AI tools themselves. And I think that this is also something that needs to be taken into consideration. And of course, an automaton, sort of a bias that is, but it's classic, but that has been widely discussed in the literature about the automation of war and the automation and technologization of weapons, is the automation bias, where basically analysts tend to defer their own judgment to the machine itself. And when you put that into the context that I was describing earlier, of course, it does create potential problems. One quick word maybe to conclude about covert action in the age of AI. I think one of the other important aspects of AI is that the expansion of battlefield transparency that everyone is talking about is also sort of creating an incentive to act as discreetly as possible. It may sound obvious, but it is again something that we do witness on the front as well. The more AI tools and the more transparent the battlefield is, the more belligerents are trying to resort to covert action and to clandestine operation and to asymmetric warfare in ways that are not being detected by the adversaries. Basically, the more technologized the battlefield is, the more belligerents are trying to untechnologize their capabilities to conduct operations. And I think that it's, again, I was mentioning the reshuffling of the cabinet, but many have interpreted the Maluk, the head of the SBU, being changed position but now he is inside the SBU, specifically responsible for developing more of the kind of actions that he has put in place, like spiderweb. And I think that is exactly the responsibility and sort of the assessment that the Ukrainians are making, is that those actions are going to be incredibly necessary and increasingly needed, especially because of those AI tools, especially because of the technologization of the front. Is that asymmetric warfare and going low and going undetected comes together with being more and more technologized. So I think it's also one of the sort of the switch that AI is also making. I was mentioning Operation Spiderweb, and I probably conclude on this. It's a classic case of clandestine action, but interestingly, it was not only made possible through the integration of AI, but AI was used in the planning and it was used in the execution phase. It was used to train the drones for target recognition, and but it was also used, as one of the SBU head or chief testified after the attack, to switch the performing mission using artificial intelligence, where they were not able to not only conduct the operations, but they used AI for the planification phase. But interestingly, they also used AI to conduct the operation itself, an operation that was aimed at countering AI and detection and Russian capabilities themselves. So interestingly, I think that I'm not finding my words so well here in English, but I think that what's really interesting about the Spiderweb case is that the tools of AI were used to counter the Russian AI tools themselves. And then in the planning and execution phase, they did use AI tools in ways that were planned to basically make them unseen by the Russians themselves. So interestingly, I think there's a twist here in the Spiderweb operation that also shows how AI tools can be used to basically conceal and not only decept, I was mentioning earlier, but conceal capabilities themselves. And of course, clandestine operations, I think, as a result of AI and the technologization and the battlefield transparency, is likely to become increasingly defined not just by their concealment of actors and of weapons, but also by their manipulation of data environments. And 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 that's what I would probably say for as a conclusion is my understanding of what AI does to intelligence so far is that it does changes a lot of things. It does changes processing and analysis, and by changing the speed and the capabilities and the scale by which raw data can be processed and analyzed, it does affect decision making, and it does affect not only in terms of time, but it also in terms of organization, in terms of sharing of responsibilities. However, just like many technological tools, when they appear, they're not just positive, so to say. They're not just bringing new things. They're also coming with good old ways or creating new kinds of problems or new kind of challenges. And that interestingly, I think, especially in the Russo-Ukrainian war, does reveal is that it has changed a lot of things, but it is increasingly creating issues that and problems that are not so old when it comes to intelligence tradecraft, especially when it comes to deception and the use of covert action. So I will conclude of this. And maybe one last thing that I want to say is that, of course, this case study is only a case study, so it has the limitations of the case study, and it's also a paper that sort of is a call for comparative studies and for bringing other cases into the thinking to see how it's been used in other cases. So it's only one contribution to the broader debate about AI and the use of these tools in the context not only of warfare, but especially in the transformation on digital transformation of intelligence. So it's only a contribution. It calls for broader debate and contradiction as well, I suppose. I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clément, for this thought-provoking presentation. We're open for questions. I would rather want to first talk about, let's say, the suggestion that AI amplifies rather than solves the problem of information overload, this information abundance problem. So, because most of your case study was about tactical tactical tools that provide tactical solutions. And when we move on to the strategic intelligence level, maybe there's still a need for human analysts, for investment in human analysts and cultural literacy more than building up AI capacities.
Yes, I think, well, there are two answers to this. The first is, although what I describe is really at the tactical level, I think that the matters of judgments that come to intelligence analysis and making sense to what comes out of on the outputs that are being provided by AI capacities is uh, is still very important at even the tactical level. It creates even a challenge for officers is to actually, as I was mentioning, the more technologized it is and the more transparent it gets, the more it feels that you have to act quickly before the other ones gets you. So that really reinforces sort of the automation bias in which you tend to sort of rely on what the outputs of the machine gets you or gives you, rather than putting your own analysis and judgments in the loop. So this contraction of times create tensions and creates sort of a psychological and cognitive effect that really tends to also impact and affect even at the tactical level judgment and intelligence analysis. At the more strategic level, I think that as I described, where AI tools have had a strategic impact is in terms of giving giving information dominance to the Ukrainians at the beginning of the war in the first 2 years, roughly speaking. So it has had strategic effects because it has changed the battlefield. And I think that if the war looks like it is right now, it's also a consequence of this Ukrainian capability at the very beginning, so that they've they've they were basically weaker than the Russians. And in many scenarios, both on the Ukrainian and the Russian side, the Russian offensive was meant to be successful. However, there's been several factors at play, and not only technology and AI factors, but information and technology dominance by Ukrainians have helped strongly, and it has strategically impacted the form of the conflict. Human judgments will remain and does remain necessary, I think, both at both level and including, of course, at the strategic, but I think they do affect both.
Yakov, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you. First of all, Monsieur Renault, thank you for a very interesting and rich talk. If I understood correctly, you emphasized primarily the quantitative data analysis capabilities and implications of AI. Excuse me. I'm wondering about qualitative AI. That is, can AI be extended to consider not only the enemy's actions and capabilities, but also the adversary's intentions? Can AI be extended to a story building capability? Has that been explored at all? And what are your thoughts? Thank you.
That's a great question. It's one of the main strengths of AI is indeed in the quantitative capacities. It's meaning in the multi-fusion source and what it provides in terms of putting together a lot of different sources. So it's about processing many data that were labor intensive for analysts before, and that basically contract time and help them make better judgments or faster judgments. I do not think, and this is where the limits of AI lie, I think, is that while it can be helpful in gaining time and processing a lot of multi-source data, when it comes to assessing intentions and adversaries' capabilities at the strategic level, I don't think that AI and maybe some people have comments about this that you know, but I don't think that it can. I don't think that at this point. I don't think that at this point it has demonstrated this capability, and I think that it goes back to human judgments to make those judgments, and I don't think that the technologization and the battlefield transparency helps better understand what will be the next move exactly, and what will be, you know, the strategic intentions, and I don't think that it might. I don't think that it does help in this regard.
Thank you. Just, you know, ChatGPT suggests that AI can do qualitative thinking, but I won't expand on that.
I mean, we can ask, and everybody ask and ChatGPT qualitative questions or qualitative answers, but the input and is still being used or is still being the judge or the final judge of those inputs still needs to be the human beings. And I think that depending on the questions you ask, you can see, and many have tricked ChatGPT in basically, you know, showing and so yeah, I think that's it.
Josh, would you like to step in?
Great. Thanks, Clément. This is a really interesting paper. I look forward to reading it. But it's a curious case, right? On the one hand, you're describing a huge number of sort of remarkable technical innovations from the civilian sector, from government agencies, and so forth, real high-speed stuff. And yet at the same time, it's all in the context of this grinding war of attrition along very long fixed lines that's been going on for like almost 4 years now, right? So there's this strange disconnect between the scope and pace of technological innovation and the old-fashioned World War One trench warfare or the modern equivalent thereof. I'm trying to figure out what can we take strategically from all this. Your presentation really focused a lot on sort of tactical issues and immediate decision makings and data integration and all that. But I'm trying to think about whether there are larger strategic lessons that we can draw from the war in Ukraine. One that, I don't know, I'll just test drive it, is that this technology inherently favors the defender, right? The defender needs to have lots and lots of real-time processing of data along a wide front in order to anticipate fires and defend against them. Whereas if you're on the offense, you don't have that like immediate time sensitive need. You're going to concentrate your forces, you're going to plan your offensive wherever you want, and either it works or it doesn't. So I don't know if this is right, but I'm just throwing it at you. Does the war suggest that AI is better for defenders, or am I wrong there? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. On the first point, I think that's what is striking about this conflict is that this sort of World War One trench warfare is also sort of the consequence of AI and technologization of the war, and that's what is really interesting. I think that this war has taken this sense and this character precisely because the battlefield transparency has made both sides being able to see what the other side is actually going to do, so that they've gained that transparency through so their adversaries move, so that they've basically settled into that trench warfare kind of conflict. So one of the strategic reasons, I think, is that information capabilities has interestingly turned warfare into something that looked a lot like it was a century and a half ago. But it's, I think, one of the consequences of technology as well, and of AI, and of the contraction of time, and the contraction of intelligence processing, making it so fast that you can't move, making it so fast that even if you get out of a hole, you're being detected so quickly that you cannot actually make a maneuver. And it's where AI has changed really the maneuver warfare by transforming technology into something that make it seeing through the other side's movement. So that's one of the strategic effects of these not only these AI tools, but what the broad things that they enable. Now on the offender and defender side, what is interesting is that at the beginning of the war, as I was mentioning in the presentation, Ukrainians' capabilities really helped them outmaneuver the Russians and compensate in terms of knowledge and information what they did not have in terms of scale and mass, which the Russians had mass and they had scale and they had strong capabilities. But yeah, technology and information dominance did help the Ukrainians sort of level up the conflict and help them really change the face of the battlefield, I think at the very beginning. Now, with the Russians sort of gaining and developing their own tools, this is what we can witness, is that while it was definitely a key factor for the Ukrainians, it has become sort of an equalizer on both sides, so that both sides are trying to use ways to circumvent AI, to circumvent transparency, to try to get back to sort of maneuver, covert action, and try to get some capabilities for maneuver by actually decepting AI tools of the other side. So it's where we are at now in terms of technology on both sides, I think, and in terms of battlefield transparency, is that it's at the beginning it was very much of the defender capability, and it did help them. But now it's so much equalized that this transparency requires both sides to find ways to circumvent those AI and transparency capabilities to operate in different ways. And this is where I think it's interesting also to see that AI has helps, still creates battlefield transparency on the front line, but it is creating an environment in which good old ways of practicing intelligence tradecraft, covert action, deception gets back into not only trying to use these tools against human judgments or against the adversary on the battlefield, but by actually trying to contradict or to decept those tools themselves. And I think that this is where we are right now. So I don't know who it actually benefits to, but it's kind of a stalemate in terms of technological capacity that has that tragic consequence of trying to bypass AI to find other ways of maneuvering and changing and getting the advantage.
And Nicholas?
Yes, I thank you for an excellent presentation. It's really fascinating. I'd like to ask you to perhaps move out of your comfort zone a bit. So I'm with the Swedish Defence University, and I'm thinking from the perspective of a small or medium-sized country. Now, looking at what you've learned from Ukraine, they're learning, from what I understand, since 2014 or 2022, has had to be a learning process and adaptation out of necessity. But if you consider not the digital transformation of a country at war, but if you consider the planned digital transformation of intelligence services in Western countries that are small and medium-sized, and not like the US, do you think we should do a copycat of how Ukraine works, or should we also copycat the way they've adapted? And you mentioned the huge number of Ukrainian AI companies. Do they, to some extent, compensate for the capabilities of the US? And how dependent has Ukraine been with its software companies on larger big tech American companies? So if we shift the focus from Ukraine to what needs to be done in other Western countries in their transformation of intelligence, what should we consider? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question, and it's actually the next sort of investigation that I want to conduct, and the next research that I want to conduct is about how Ukrainian intelligence services have turned quite quickly from what they used to be, sort of a KGB style of intelligence services, into services that were fit to massively cooperate with Western intelligence organizations, especially the United States, of course. So what that means in terms of organizational transformation and in terms of gaining and adapting their own organization in such a quick delay is, of course, the product of war, but is also very interesting in terms of transforming their own organization. And I would be interested in trying to find out what sort of organizational process they follow to internally speaking, to sort of adapt and transform their intelligence organization from what it was in 2014 to what it was 10 years after. So I think that there's sort of a bureaucratic process I'm interested in here that might actually contribute to answer your question. I do not have an answer yet. However, what is interesting in this case is that they've leveraged massively civil society and the private sector, and and in a very, very not only efficient way, but massive way. And it probably echoes Josh's questions earlier. It's on the defender side as well to be able to scale up so quickly, because when you're on the defender side, you had to defend yourself, and the civilian society has basically massively moved towards developing capabilities that could be used for military and defense purposes, for the military and for Ukrainian defense. So I think it was one of the elements as well. Most of the civil society has turned towards it. Many civilians, especially when you look at open source intelligence, Telegram, have contributed to the war effort by reporting things, weird things that they've seen, actually putting some footage into the loop. And that has created an environment in which not only so much data was being produced, but it was also being massively, of course, processed by AI. But it developed the AI tools by the very fact that a lot of civilians contributed to this effort. So I think this is also one of the tools. It's a sort of mass effect of this capability. So I would say that maybe for smaller countries that are not at war, but it's the case in many Western intelligence organizations. It's about contributing, it's about cooperating with the private sector and leveraging the capabilities of the private sector, whether it's about buying on-shelf capabilities or about buying, civilian capabilities that you turn inside secret statecraft for your own purposes. It's about using former intelligence officers working for intelligence organizations that have the know-how and that basically spot the needs and the specific needs of intelligence organizations to go outside in the private sector and develop tools that they know will be of direct use and for maybe for only use for intelligence organizations. So I think it's about leveraging this capability and this dynamism of the private sector, uh, and and um, and it's also something apart from AI that we've witnessed from smaller countries about buying on-shelf SIGINT capabilities because they're not able to develop them themselves, and of course there's a huge and growing market in this regard when it comes to cyber and SIGINT capabilities. So I think for smaller intelligence organizations, the point is about leveraging these capabilities to put them at scale.
Itai, are you with us?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I apologize that I'm without video. I've kids running around the house. Uh, Thank you very much for the talk. Fascinating stuff. I'm less familiar with the Ukraine-Russian war and more with the Israeli-Gazan war and the use of their technology. And I was wondering about sort of your thoughts and analogies between these two different types of fronts or different, very different types of warfare. You mentioned that there's a case study, and obviously the limits of case studies that it doesn't apply to other circumstances perfectly, right? So in that respect, I was wondering what lessons can we learn for other sort of types of engagement, specifically those that involve civilians and not designated front lines, where the use of these technologies becomes a lot less certain, right? And a lot riskier, perhaps. And then so on those lines, I was wondering sort of what are the weaknesses that you've identified, and is there any data coming out from the Ukraine-Russian war about misinformation of these or false positives coming from these systems, false attacks, incorrect identification of targets, and so on? Do we have quantitative data about this, and then thinking about how do we apply that to other circumstances? Okay, yeah.
Thank you very much for this question. I indeed do not want to generalize from that case too much because I think that it's a case study only, and I think again that it needs comparative studies and broader debates to actually build a sort of a corpus of knowledge about AI and to really assess what it really does to intelligence. And we will need time to not only create that corpus, but we'll also need time to understand what it really does to intelligence, because I think that the discourses there's an inflation of discourse about the transformative effect, but what the Russo-Ukrainian war shows so far is that yes, it has had a transformative effect, but now it's creating other, as I was mentioning, other types of problems. There's an expression in France that says if you kick something out from the door, it will come back by the window, and it's a sort of a literal translation. But that's what happens with AI, I think, is that we thought that it would be so transformative that many problems will be resolved with this. Well, now that it's being widely used on both sides, we can see that the old problems are coming back by the window, if I may say. And that the old tradecraft might not be so old after all. So I think that it's important to keep that in mind. I am not familiar with the Israeli use of AI in the Gaza Strip. I've only read broad stuff about it, but not as specific as in the Russo-Ukrainian war. But I think this is typically something that I do mention in the article as well. That should be a case study as well for a comparative study to basically maybe challenge some of the assumptions I make in this paper. But it's something that should be done clearly, I think. And regarding your second question, it is exactly what is happening right now on the Russian on the front line. There's been reported cases where the creation of fake SIGINT reports, fake imagery, has pushed the Ukrainians to target things that basically did not exist. And this is exactly how it's being used and growingly used right now. Is that there's been fake targets being created, and there's been an increasing capability on both sides to leverage AI capabilities to intoxicate the other side's AI capabilities to make them infer intelligence and infer outputs that were actually erroneous. So I think this is exactly what is at stake right now. As I was mentioning, is that both sides are using so much AI that the battlefield transparency is creating incentives to try to decept the other side's AI capabilities. This is what it is creating right now, and this is what needs to be followed closely, I think, in the months to come and as the conflict goes on, because I do assume that it's only the beginning.
Okay, David, you wanted to speak?
Yes, thank you. And indeed, thought-provoking on many levels. I'm in Sweden designing applications for intelligence analysts. And one of the things that I'd like to hear you address is whether explainability is important. If you use vector-based AI that we're all familiar with, like ChatGPT and Gemini and so on, sure, you can ask the AI for an explanation, but it's just another hallucination. Are you seeing any demand for explainability, which can be achieved with using knowledge graphs and ontologies where the semantics are explicit? Or do you see everyone just content with, believing whatever the AI is saying?
Yeah, it gets back to the training and to data literacy and for analysts and for people using these tools. And it's I do think that to be a good intelligence analyst, you do not only need to master or try to master your cognitive biases or knowing about human judgments and how you base your own judgments and how you exploit your sources. But you also need to be curious about your captors or collectors. You also need to sort of take your foot and go to with the SIGINT analyst or the imagery analyst to try to better understand what exactly he's got in his hands. What are the capabilities of his tools? And it's only by understanding what these capabilities and these technical tools can provide you in terms of what they can collect in intelligence, that you can, as an analyst or as a null source analyst, really leverage the power of the collector. Well, I think it's exactly the same with those tools, is that training AI literacy and trying to understand what it can give you, what it cannot give you, where it can actually lead you to misinterpretation, what is the difference between, what the data can provide you with inference, and what this inference is, and where inference is different from your own human judgments as an analyst and as a trained analyst, is also something is key to using and leveraging these tools. I think it can be highly powerful, but it can create weakness for someone who might actually for an analyst that might want to overly rely on those tools, or who does not have the data literacy about those tools, and therefore may not identify what it can provide versus what it can versus what it can create in terms of misjudgments. So I don't know if it clearly answers your questions, but yeah, I do think that this training and this understanding of what those tools can really create and what can really provide, either positively or negatively, is of course key for the people who will use them to try to use them wisely. But you know, I think it's the same for there's an analogy that I often think about is about social networks. I mean, back in 2010 or 2011, when I remember during the Arab Revolution, when there was so much Facebook and Twitter and it was connecting people with each other, so many people around were saying, I mean, people are getting connected with each other, so they can exchange with each other. So it will break barriers. It will basically be the spread of the liberal order because there's so much things that you can do with social networks now that the world is open to everyone, so that social networks will have a lot of positive effects. Now, when we think about the discourse and the trajectory that social networks have had in the last few years and how we think about disinformation and what it creates as a tool of cognitive warfare, I do think that the discourse is similar when it comes to AI. It is a real powerful tool. Social networks is also a real powerful tool. As researchers, we all know that there's a lot we can get from social networks. However, it's only by knowing what it can do positively as well as how it can affect negatively that you actually can make the most of it and make sort of a wise use of it. And I think that what happened with social networks over the last 10 or 15 years, especially in terms of the evolution of the discourse, very positive to more neutral to something that is being seen as more of a threat, is probably something that will, similarly happen to AI. The current discourse is about the revolution that it brings, but it's a transformation in many ways. But I think that it's only by mastering how it works that people will get not only the positive, but also the negative effect of it. And so it will become a tool that is, of course, really useful. But like all tools, it creates other kinds of problems. And
Thank you.
Lastly, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you, Clément, for this presentation. It was very useful. And I would also agree with David on the need for traceability or explainability. I think knowledge graph are one of the technology or actually like an application that could help with that. Broadening the question on, we have observed the adoption of AI, broad sense, not only LLM, but computer vision in Ukraine and in Russia. Especially in Ukraine, they benefited from, I would say, the initiative of creating an entire new architecture that is data-centric, which is still something that the Western armed forces are struggling with. So in the UK, I'm based in the UK, I'm French, but I know that the French have the same problem. They are still struggling in what they call building the sort of digital targeting web. In some ways, they are trying to merge quite a lot of data together in order to have AI deployed system that be able to query them and retrieve them. Do you see any, I would say, experts or reports or publication that will look at these typical problem? Because it's one thing to look at the barrier to adoption of AI by the military when it comes to their modus operandi and doctrines, but there's also a technical architecture part that prevents these Western armed forces to truly use AI just because they are so behind when it comes to secret cloud or graph databases or all these sort of technologies that are required to deploy AI at scale. Are you aware of any report or publication that have been published on this topic, or does it need to be published?
No, I don't think about any specific about the French or the British case. But what we can see and what we can witness from the information we can get here is that and this is also related to the declaration by Macron about 2/3 of intelligence being shared with the Ukrainians are now from France. I do think it's exaggerated, and it's also not how intelligence is being assessed. It's not so much in terms of quantity, and it's not also an ability that even in French intelligence services, I think, have the ability to know everything that's being shared with the Ukrainians, so that they can make an assessment of how much is actually French. But what it relates to is about. But what's interesting is that the military intelligence, the Ukrainian military intelligence, have not reacted to this declaration, although they have been asked by the Kyiv Independent to actually reply to this. They have not replied. So I think it's interesting because the Ukrainian communication when it comes to these things have been very aggressive, and especially against the French at the beginning of the war, when they were basically tweeting about, making videos about what the French were officially saying they were providing to the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians replying on Twitter by putting baguette and red wine about, oh, hi, the French, this is only what you are providing us. Now they do not reply. And clearly, since the cutoff of intelligence last March and by the United States, and the threat of cutting off intelligence last November, in the year of 2025, there's been a growing shift towards relying on intelligence from Europeans. And it is in this pattern, I think, that more Europeans are gaining, and especially intelligence services, do try to leverage Ukrainian capabilities and Ukrainian experience to develop their tools and their information grid and their AI capabilities, and to try to implement them in their own intelligence systems. There's been reports of cooperation between Griselda and some French startups and small companies working specially for the French military intelligence. And this is by this cooperation that I think that this grid is trying to develop for the French at least, is by leveraging those private sector companies' capabilities and trying to build on Ukrainian experience and Ukrainian expertise that they've gained not only on the front line, but in gaining and in getting better in leveraging those capabilities that the French and probably the British as well are although I think that the British are in a different position, because with the Five Eyes and with GCHQ, they're probably in a slightly different position in terms of the relationship with the Ukrainians that have been maybe stronger than what the French has had since 2014. But I think that this is through these pathways of cooperating more and more that smaller and the European defense is trying to develop that information and leveraging those AI tools. I think that the Ukrainian experience will be very important in this, and there's been growing cooperation and growing investments in trying to create private sector cooperation to leverage these tools for the French, for the British, and for, I suppose, other European allies. I don't know if that precisely answers your questions, but
yeah, I think there's a need for the research community also to. I know it's a bit complicated because it's more technical than research, like I would say political and international relation research, but I've not seen yet any publication that is looking really at, what do you need to adopt these systems. So looking at Ukraine, what they've done, they have created an entire architecture, to deploy these AI systems. What is missing in France or in Europe to do the same thing? Like, as you say, Macron has created the defense data center. So we have a dedicated defense data center on which we can actually train AI models. That's one. But you need a secret cloud. So you need a cloud that is only accessible by the MOD. All these sort of things that are missing, to really deploy AI at scale in our countries also. And so far, I've not seen a sort of comprehensive study of how much behind we are compared to the Ukrainians, for example.
Yeah, that's I haven't seen any, and and what would be interesting is to try to ask inside the Ministry of Defense when there's been sort of comprehensive studies that are classified but that have been made by military and the defense apparatus in terms of, okay, what the Ukrainians have, what they have developed, and what it would require in terms of adaptation from our organization. Probably there has been, but I have no knowledge of, at least.
Okay, thank you very much. We almost made it on time. We're slightly over the 90 minutes mark. So thank you, Dr. Renault, for giving us this engaging talk. It was a fascinating presentation, very interesting case study, as well as a good read. And thank you all for joining us. I will keep you updated on our next event via email and social media. And good night to everyone. or day.
Thank
Depends on where you are.
Thank you so much, Amir. Excellent.
you
Thanks.
very
Bye.
much. Thank you very much to you.